want to watch all these movies. I know so many of them. I know one already jumped out to me. So Jumanji here. Not as big a fan of the remake. I think is with anyone who's a child. When a film comes out, you have a certain attachment to it. That idea of going into a board game and having it become this whole world and really opening up your imagination. I still watch it to this day. I think it holds up. Rocky IV. There's nothing I'm going to say about this film that most people don't know over the age of 25. Hands down, best montage of all time of any film I've ever seen. My last one is probably going to be Back to the Future. I don't know what it says. I'm trying to read into it, what it says about me. I don't just like horrors or dramas, right? Yeah, I run the whole game. Hi, my name's Carter Brooks, writer, director, production designer, you name it, I do it on set. Welcome to the Film Stock Podcast, and these are my 3 films, and I'm looking forward to talking to you guys.
Cool, man. Well, welcome to the Film Stock Podcast. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So I have been very excited to talk to you for a while now because this is the first opportunity to have an actual madman on this podcast. Yeah, I mean that sincerely because we met back on Steve Schloss's Writer's Block, where I was producing and you were, everything art related. And at the time, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was my first memory. We did a Zoom call and you were just very quiet. You had good questions to ask, but you didn't know me, I didn't know you. And I was just like, okay, he seems to be taking in and making a lot of good suggestions. But then as the process went on and I saw the amount of work that you put into that thing, the long nights, the long days, your own money, the craftsmanship that went into the construction of the prison cell, the craftsmanship or the pure ingenuity of fixing the desks so that, the typewriter flipped out. So yeah, I've been looking to talk to you for a while because that was just the taste of it. But now to find out everything else that you've been up to and are doing.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on that moment actually. So,
when we met?
Yeah,
via
when we
Zoom?
met. Yeah, via the Zoom. So we had just come off Project Handyman that I worked on.
You and Steve?
Yeah, and Steve and Justin and the people who are listening have no idea who those people are, but Steve's a very talented DP and director out there, and Handyman was a project that I worked on with him and Justin Wright, who helped produce it as well, who was then on this film Writer's Block that you were on. And I don't believe I was on that project initially, and I got sent the Zoom invite by accident, probably because we were dealing with Handyman or had just gotten off of it.
Yeah.
And so, I have a very good rapport with Steve. I talk to him a lot. And I just thought it would be funny to hop on that Zoom, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to be on it.
So you weren't actually kind of conscripted to be a part of that movie just yet?
I may have been conscripted to be a part of the movie. My memory is not serving me on that, but I know I was not supposed to be on that Zoom call.
Okay.
And then I came on, and then you guys started talking to me like I was supposed to be there.
And you just played the part.
And I just played the part, and then, you were talking about needing a desk, and you guys were going to order one online, and I was like, all right, well, let me just look on Marketplace real quick. And just by happenstance, that really cool desk, if you haven't looked it up, look up Writer's Block, when it is, publicly available or available online, and there's a really cool shot of a desk in there. And this awesome desk that you would have thought was really thought out and planned literally just happened because I was trying to jump and be a part of that conversation. And I was like, let me just look up real quick, see if I can contribute to this conversation. And then the second I saw it, I knew we had to have it. And funny enough, the person we got the desk from, it's just a regular desk. And I didn't know this until I went to pick it up, but the guy I picked it up from actually builds sets for
get out.
For big, big productions. Doesn't do it full time, but
was that desk a set?
No, it was his wife's.
It was just his wife's.
And she wanted to get rid of it.
Okay.
And he just put it up on Marketplace, and then just the odds of, 2 people who were working on sets at the time just kind of bumping into each other was really cool. Yeah. And now I have that person, to reach out to if I get stuck on stuff like that. He does have a lot of experience. He's a very, very talented builder, but yeah, the desk was just his wife's. He was trying to get rid of it. Had no reference to movie or anything on the listing, and it naturally came up in conversation when he's like, oh, hey, not too many people are looking for these desks anymore. And I mentioned it was for a film, and his eyes just lit up. So,
get to see it on the screen from here on out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an awesome. I mean, I guess that goes to show one piece that you bring to the overall puzzle. It's my experience with you has been that you're always just willing to, whether by accident or not, you're always willing to hop to the task of whatever creative challenge is being presented. I mean, just kind of continuing with writer's block. I mean, the the set being the main one, and like the hours and hours, and you locking your keys in the car and that whole
I forgot about that one.
kerfuffle. But then obviously the blood cannons, that movie is heavily covered in blood, and all the special effects that you kind of worked on with Jordan Pacheco. Can you talk a little bit about what went into that?
Yeah, so movie calls for a lot of blood effects. And we had just, talking about Handyman again, had just come off a film where I had for the first time really done anything with blood.
Mhm.
And we had used some hand pumps and stuff, and it came out good. I had made some pneumatic, explosions with blood, really with no experience, and quite honestly, not even looking on the internet, just kind of figuring it out on my own. And then, as I got more and more involved with writer's block, I realized that, there's going to be a big need for some blood effects going on. And so, I did a little bit of research and did a lot of R&D in my garage with water. And the one thing I learned about blood effects real quick is they make a mess no matter where you are or what you're doing.
Or what kind of control mechanisms you try and put in place.
Yeah, it's going to go
get
anywhere and everywhere, no matter what you try and do. And even when you're testing with water, you're like, oh, this won't make it. Yeah, but then it's blowing water all over your garage too. And it's, it's really unique. But, you mentioned Jordan, and he was really someone who had a lot of experience with blood. He wasn't brought on to do any kind of blood explosions, but his effects and blood effects that he did, in terms of like makeup applications and, some real gore. I mean, he's tremendously talented, and he was able to share with me some insight about, how to adjust the tubes where the blood comes out to make it more realistic. Like you could slit it certain ways, and you had to crimp the end to build up pressure. And so yeah, I brought what I thought was my best attempt at the blood effects, but having Jordan there really helped take it to the next level for me. And, he knew how to apply the tubes I'd built to the body. I mean, some things, when you're doing it for your first or second time, you don't really have all the answers. You try and prepare as much as you can, but just having anyone who has experience on set is going to help you tremendously. And so, maybe I took it 95% of the way. And then he really helped take it to the next level and make sure that it was on the level that we needed for that film.
Well, that was a testament to what Steve did. I mean, he clearly had a vision on that project.
Without question.
And, not only did he want everything to be shown, but he wanted it to be shown in a 360 and zoom ins and macro and micro shots. And
that's what I love about Steve too, is I think, one of the things that you learn about me when you work with me, I don't hold back. I think I'm a very ambitious person. Ambition knows no bounds. And so that can bring a lot of cool things and get you in a lot of trouble too. Trying to do things that just aren't there, the budget, the time. But it also allows you to push the envelope. And that's one thing I really like about Steve is he's cut from the same cloth in that regard. He's going to shoot for the moon. He's not going to hold back. And even myself, when he said to me, like, I was like, all right, so we're going to have the camera go a certain way so I can tuck it in here. And he's like, no, you're going to be looking right at him. I'm like, where am I going to hide the tube? And like, I don't even know if this is going to look good. I've never done this. And it's kind of like, yeah, well, we'll figure it out, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess we will. And we got really lucky too. Don't get me wrong. A lot of those takes were one takes, and we didn't have time to do others. And we got really lucky. But I think, to take a saying from Larry Bird, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Mm-hmm.
And that's proven time and time again in my life. So it's just give it everything you got. And, maybe at the end of the day, people go, we were lucky, but if you didn't do all that preparation and work, you wouldn't have gotten lucky. So yeah, we did get lucky, but there were a lot of people doing a lot of things to make that happen.
Fair enough. Yeah, we had a hardworking team on that. But let me take it back a huge step real quick, because it's been a while since we've spoken to each other, and I want to actually get a sense of your history.
Yeah, we don't get along very well.
Yeah, it's button heads all the time. So you have a weird, to my understanding, kind of foot in the door with the film industry. Is that fair to say in a broad sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I took the traditional route.
Because you had your own company, right? Or
Yeah.
you might still have it.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah,
you
I
do.
still have. I have my own marketing agency.
So you have your own marketing agency where I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of took on the role of creating some of the ad campaigns on a visual level, cinematography, et cetera, but then you kind of wanted to transition out of that and do something you were more passionate about, narrative work. But that only happened within the past, 3 years that you kind of took that step?
I think we did our first narrative one about a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit longer than that.
And would that have been the Handyman? Would you consider that
No, we had done one. We had done some 48-hour projects. If you're not familiar with the 48-hour project, it's you basically go to a meeting on a Friday night. It's like this big gathering, and they draw genres, and they draw a prop, and they draw a line that you have to say in the movie. So you really can't prepare. You're not supposed to prepare for it, other than having a location and your crew and stuff. And so, you basically show up, and they're like, "Oh, you got two choices. You could do a comedy or like a noir film."
Okay.
And you have to have a pizza box in it. Yeah. And someone's got to say, "Show me the money," right? And so
they give you small sets of rules that you need to implement into the film.
And then you have literally, with no exception, down to the second, 48 hours to script it, film it, edit it, deliver it. And so usually you'll spend all Friday night writing it. You start filming on Saturday. You'll film all through the night on Saturday and probably some on Sunday. And hopefully you have an editor who's working on it on Saturday, finishing it up on Sunday. But no matter what, it's always up against the gun to get that thing submitted. So anyways, so that was my intro to narrative work. And I think that for a lot of people, that is a good path. I think the 48 is a great way to have, baptism by fire with narrative work. I had never done anything prior to it. And then it's like, well, now you got to do it all, and not just do it all and do it in 48 hours.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really stressful. And, we made plenty of mistakes. Don't get me wrong. But I think that is a great way to get into it. And that's how I got into it.
And remind me the title of that one again.
So the first one we did was called, the first one that I was a part of was called Shock Therapy.
Okay, so not Expionage.
Not Expionage. That was the next year.
That was the next year. Okay.
Yeah, and the final year that I'll probably do a 48.
It just burned. Well, honestly, from what I understand, this is the reason I've never done it. I mean, working in the film industry, I'm used to, 12, 16-hour days spread out over 5 days, and then you just completely crash for 2. But it sounds like with the 48-hour film festivals, you're essentially distilling that whole week down into 48 hours. You're just completely flipping the script.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The stress of it really isn't a problem. I mean, I live in stress with every project I do. As you've mentioned, I'll pull the 24, 48 hour. I've worked a 52-hour day before. Like that's doesn't scare me.
Because you commit to the project. You want to raise your game.
I refuse to fail. And even if I fail, it's not because I accepted it more often than not. It's just I didn't get there even though I was going full speed. But I think, once you get to a point where you're in the narrative world and you're writing your own stuff, you start to realize that the 48s are a good Kickstarter to get you energized if you're feeling like you got nothing going on, to get some people together because you're not allowed to pay anyone that you might not otherwise be able to get. This great camaraderie on it. I mean, some of the people that I've met on these 48s, I still talk to this day, even though I haven't seen them since it. Like, I mean, I even talk to them on some of them a daily, some of them a weekly basis. I mean, these people I've only met once. It's just a great way to meet other people. But I think the thing that holds me back from doing another one is that once you start writing on your own, you realize that the 48 is never going to produce something that, you're going to want to use to leverage or grow your career, because it's always chicken winged by you only had 48 hours to do it. You only had 6 hours to write it. I mean, when you go to show someone a piece of your work, no one cares that it was a 48. I mean,
they want to know if it's good. They want to know if they're engaged.
And that's a mantra I live by, not to get too far off course, but it's like, nobody cares, right? That's what I live by. Nobody cares. Make them care. Well, with the 48, when you're in the competition, it's great. Everybody who has a 48 team, I think there were like 52 teams last year in the Boston one. It's a lot of fun, and it's very competitive. And everybody who's watching it knows what's going on, right? I mean, all these other teams are like, wow, how'd they do that in 48? Or that was really good, or this or that. They all know that it was a 48, and they have certain expectations.
They're thinking in that term.
But when you step outside of that competition and you try and say, hey, you should do a project with me. And they go, oh, show me some stuff you've done. And you like show them it. And then like you see all the problems with it. And those problems would not exist if you had even a week to do it or 2 weeks to do it. And you find yourself just giving all these explanations and things before they even watch it. And so that's why I don't like to do it, because if I'm going to put all that time and energy into something, I'd rather do it, give it the time it needs, and have something I can be proud of and show people moving forward to maybe get them to work with me, or, you know, get bigger projects where the 48, no matter how good you do, and there have been some really amazing ones out there, including the one that Steve did. I can't believe they did it in 48 hours. But
is that the one at the house or the one in the prison?
Like the prison one.
The prison one was really good.
It's amazing.
That's an example of that's a rare example where you can show that, and you know, yeah, we did that in 48 hours.
Yeah, but that group is an anomaly. I mean, they were a well-oiled machine of, you know, full of professionals. And I think, you know, that being said, I think even they, you know, to maybe someone a little further down, not as far down the road, that seems like a really high bar. But I know to a lot of people on that film, even, they look at it the same way I look at my 48s. Like, yeah, their bar is even higher than that. And so, you know, I can't speak for other people, but, you know, I love the 48s. I don't have anything bad to say about the 48s. I think they're a great way to jumpstart narrative film career. I think they're a lot of fun. You can meet a lot of great people, and heck, I might do one down the road. But I just know that with all the time and energy you put into it, I would much rather put that into something that I know is not going to be given shortcuts because of the rules of a competition, you know, because you're always going to say, oh, it could have been this or it could have been that. I never want to have to say that, but you have to when you do the 48, because there's just some things that just go by the wayside. I mean, you don't even know what you're writing about until the night of, and then you're coming up with it. So yeah, I'm proud of what we did in the 48. I think what we did was really incredible with this movie, Expionage.
It's hilarious, by the way.
Oh,
it was
thank you.
honestly hilarious. I remember seeing it at Coolidge and just laughing my ass off from start to finish. It was pretty impressive that you were able to pull something off like that. I mean, I know in your head you're sitting there going, you know, it's not up to my standards, et cetera, but it was really impressive how many jokes you were getting into and landing in such a small amount of time. And on top of that, you were dealing with young actors, you were dealing with stunts.
No, I would say the actors weren't young. The actors were... They were very good. I think
or it was just the girl, right?
She was one young girl. Yeah, one young girl. But the rest they're all very funny people.
Yeah.
And so, you know your cast going into these competitions.
Yep.
And so I knew deep down that no matter what we drew, there was going to be an element of comedy influx into it. I mean, you could put them in an improv room and they make the whole room laugh.
And was that how it was when you guys got the script? Was it like, were you writing for them or were you all writing together?
I think, you know, Kelsey Leach, who wrote it with me, you know, we were writing for, you know, the story that we decided to come up with. We didn't write it specifically for them.
Yep.
But, you know, we were writing it to be a comedy, even though I think what we chose was mistaken identity was the genre we got, or doppelganger, something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
But, you know, we were writing it to make sure we met that criteria, but, you know, we were writing it to be funny, and we knew that the cast was going to be able to deliver no matter what we did. I didn't write it to their strengths, but I'd say when we were rolling, you know, directing that film, I also knew that I was going to give those guys a lot of rope, because there are things they come up with on set. And I'm sure this is the case with a lot of comedy movies that as a writer, you just can't put in there, but in the moment they say this one thing and the whole, you know, you ruin the take because everybody's laughing, including me right next to camera, you know? And so
it just changes the whole dynamic.
You got to be careful because, you know, the continuity can become a real mess when you let it get too far off the rails. But a lot of the things that are in there, you know, some of it was scripted, but a lot of it was on the fly and we let it roll. And I'm so glad we did. And the funny nature of it has brought a lot out of it in the editing. And, you know, we've had, Jack Cernato, you know, running the initial edit on it for the 48. And then we just had Jack Geronimo do kind of the final touch up in the color. And actually, I think if it's not done today, it'll probably be done the next day or so. A year later, I know, probably let it go a little too long.
Wait, hold on. I think I just missed a beat. You're talking about you're still tinkering with Expionage even after all this time?
Yeah, so it's done. It went out to the competition, but, you know, it's one of those things where, like I just said, you know, you still want to be able to put it in festivals and showcase it, because a lot of people, you know, I think we had 18 cast and crew on there. A lot of people put in a lot of hard work, and I don't want to create the illusion that it's not up to my standard. I mean, we crushed it for a 48. I'm very happy with that. And so I do think that the whole cast and crew deserves to have that, do its little festival run and have some fun with it, because, you know, it is worthy of that. And so, yeah, so we're, you know, we sent it off to just do some minor touch up on maybe some sound effects and a couple visual effects. Like, for example, we didn't have time to get the credits done. Right? In
there were no credits?
There were no credits at the 48, right?
Okay.
I think it would be unfair to the cast and crew to let that project live on without credits.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one of the things we're doing. We put in a credit sequence, and, you know, Jack is amazing with color as well. So, you know, he's doing a color pass. That's one of the things, you know, Jack and Jack, it gets confusing. But first Jack, who did the majority of the edit, you know, he did a great job with it for the 48. But, you know, you can't spend all day on color when you're trying to meet a deadline. So just having that next pass on color, you know, like I said, just getting it as good as it could have been without, you know, going back and reinventing the wheel. And then, yeah, we'll submit it to everything we can, and, you know, get as much, you know, press for the people who are on it, because I'd love for them to be able to use that stuff for their reels to get more work. And, you know, I am still very proud of, you know, what we accomplished that day. And I think I want to show people, and, you know, yeah, after you've watched it 300 times, the jokes don't land anymore. Some of them do, which is great. That's how you know it's good.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's getting tougher and tougher for me to watch, as I think it is for a lot of people with comedies. But people who watch it the first time, you can see in their eyes, they're enjoying it. So
it really was a fun experience. I can't wait to see. I mean, I can't wait to see what you guys have done to kind of tinker with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So, okay, you got your jumpstart kind of creatively speaking, you know, with the 48 hour, you got the bug.
Yeah.
And then you go on to do this other 48. But in the meantime, you're working on other projects, right?
Yeah.
Like, was writer's block in between? Yeah, because if I remember correctly, it would have been writer's block. It would have been Odessa.
Yep.
And then Expionage was maybe right there with Kill That Man, right around that same time. So you had a solid run of it for.
Yeah, I was probably doing a project every 1 to 3 months for a good year or so. It's funny you mentioned my prior job. The 48 isn't the only reason I get the narrative bug. So I have done a fair share of corporate stuff on budgets that have been higher than anything I've done with narrative work to date. And I took on a real producer role in a lot of those films. And, you know, Steve Schloss, who's, as I mentioned, is an amazing cinematographer, directed them. But we have a relationship in a way where he allowed me to be very involved in a lot of the creative, and the client was very involved in the creative. And I think one thing for both of us, and once again, I can't speak for him, but that made us make the jump to narrative, is that, you know, you spend a lot of time and energy, just like the 48, but then the client always comes in off the ropes. And they have a change that you don't agree with, or you think kills the creativity of it, or doesn't align with what you want to do. And you can't argue, right? Because they're paying the bills. So when it comes to narrative, a big reason I made that jump was I want to make something that's uniquely my own, and that no one can tell me that, well, this isn't going to resonate with people or this or that. And, I mean, what I'm finding is you still get that pushback even in the narrative world, whether
100%.
It's, you know, especially when I start playing around people who are going to be giving me money to do their projects. But you have much more flexibility in that regard than I ever did in the corporate world. And I don't have to slap a logo on the end of it and worry about, you know, you just have a blank slate to start at least. You know, you don't have to worry about meeting the branding or the style of the company you're working with. You can just start from what you think is where you want to be.
Sure.
And I do like that. But yeah, so then, you know, once we caught the bug, every 1 to 3 months, movie. I was trying to be a part of anything I could be a part of, whether I was involved in funding, producing, or just tangibly being around. You know, I arguably didn't do too much on Odessa, but it was a great experience
to be there. It was solid having you there, though, especially with the 360 rig, and, you know, you brought a lot.
Yeah, that's right. That was the introduction of the 360 rig.
We'll talk about the 360 rig, but
Okay.
real quick, I want to just kind of elaborate on what else you did for Odessa because, Odessa was my short film. Like, I kind of caught that bug with Steve around the same time when he did Writer's Block. Like, his enthusiasm for that project just got me so jazzed up. I was coming off of a long editing process with a previous short film, and I was kind of beaten and haggard, and I kind of met him, talked to him, and he was like, here we go. So I got caught up in that energy, and I wrote this ridiculous, Odessa with, a bunch of different locations, bunch of different characters kind of passing the baton.
It was ambitious.
It was ambitious, but I was feeding off of his energy, and I was also loving the crew that we had kind of just accumulated around us, between yourself, Jack, Jordan Carroll, all these people, just kind of right time, right place. But like in the actual production of Odessa, you were absolutely paramount being there. Like, not only are you just like a jack of all trades, like, you were kind of conscripted to be there for more of the effects portion of it, but you also were troubleshooting, the whole last shot with, the car going into the tree and then getting that fucker out of there.
Yeah,
And
right. Oh yeah.
like you just had your hands in everything. I think that your energy being on set is, like you said, you kind of have a high expectation for yourself, and it seems to raise the expectations of everybody around there. But before we go into that, I want to go back even further. We had talked about the marketing company, but did you always know that you wanted to be in film, or is that like something that you stumbled across while you were doing the marketing, found that you were good at?
I have just an insanely high level of ADHD. And
so film kind of helps check those boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I've at different stages of my life, I've been very serious about a lot of things, and I always do them. This is gonna sound like to my own horn, but I do them at a high level, or I don't do them. And so, at a stage in my life, it was basketball. I went, as someone who didn't even play in high school. I think I scored 11 points in my high school career. I just decided one day I was gonna go play Division I basketball in the Big East. I played for Providence College, and I did that, and I walked on. And
I probably saw you play now that I'm thinking about it.
yeah, and then I just. I graduated. I haven't picked up a basketball since in 15 years. People can't believe that. You go from playing, in front of 30,000 people on national TV. Not that I played much. I don't want to give that illusion. I barely played. But you go from that and then to just never picking up a basketball again. And then, I wanted to open a gym. I got really into weightlifting and strength training. I was very serious about that for maybe 3 or 4 years of my life. And then I started getting really into fishing. I started a fishing show. It's out there on YouTube. It's one of those things you cringe at when you look at, but it got a lot of traction. And I think when I started doing that, I started saying, well, maybe I want to get into something more creative and media related. I was doing everything with GoPros, no idea what I was doing. But some of our videos got like hundreds of thousands of views. And I said, all right, this is a thing. Then I had kids, and fishing takes up 8 hours of a day, and it was really tough to do. So, that lasted about 3 years, and we dropped that. I mean, even though it was going pretty good. And then I got into working on cars, started a show on that, got some really good traction on that, thousands of views as well. I mean, I still get messages. It's been 4 years since I put out a video. People still message me every week, when's the next video coming out? I'm like, it's been 4 years. I don't think another one's coming out.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
I still have the vehicles in my house because I do want to pick back up on it. And then, I got really involved in my business, growing my business, and then I burnt myself out with that. And then just a natural transition with some of the media, show background to, and then the marketing side and the video production. I've always loved movies. That's never been in question. Like all day, every day.
So really it was only, it wasn't a question of will he, it was a question of when will he.
Yeah. And I think, I'm here. And the thing about film that I think is the reason I'm going to stay in it, unlike all these other things that only last 3 to 5 years of my life, is film can be anything you want.
Yeah.
Maybe right now in my life, I'm really passionate about, like, say, doing dramas or something, as I was mentioning in the intro. But, also, all right, now I get bored with that. I don't want, sad stories or whatever. Now I'm going to go to comedy or go do an action movie or, and the same thing with, as you mentioned, I do everything on set. I think that applies to my ADHD as well, is like, yeah, maybe I love building, cool camera rigs and stuff one day, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of bored with this. Let me go do production design. And I get bored with that, and then I'm like, you know what? All right, maybe I'll learn a little bit about, special effects. And then, okay, all right. Well, I've always liked writing and I love directing, but I think everyone says they are and want to be a director. I do. You never get bored with directing. It's just, can I get to a point where I'm directing everything? I'm not at that stage in my career, so I have to do other things. Otherwise, I would just choose to direct everything. I really enjoy it because you have your hands in everything, which is really exciting for me. But given that I'm not at the level of my career where people will trust me to direct all their projects yet, I do have to take on these other roles. So I think part of the reason that I do everything on set is I get bored with some things and then I get really passionate about others, and, I dive head on into it. I'll watch 90 YouTube videos on it, and, I'll catch up in a few months to a standard that's high enough where people will trust me to do things. And so you do enough of that over your life and you feel confident to pick up anything or any task that gets put in front of you. And I think, a lot of the reason people bring me on set is not because I'm amazing at any one thing, is that, I can be a problem solver, and that's because I've had my hand in so many different things that almost anything comes up, I've probably come across it at some point in my life where I can apply some method of thought or approach to it. And, so I think, when I'm on set, first and foremost, if it's not my project, even if it is your project, I think, there's this illusion that like this director thing is like just so artsy and offhand, but it's not. Your job is to literally be a problem solver. I mean, all you're being dealt with on set, no matter what level you're at, from what I've seen, I can't say I've been on giant movies before, but I've watched enough documentaries that you're just dealing with problems the whole time. And it's how you handle those problems and adapt to them as to whether it's going to be successful or not. So I think being a problem solver has equipped me to be able to take on larger roles on sets because I don't freeze up. I'm just thinking about, okay, how can we solve or figure out or come up with a solution for what's happening right now, and how do we do it fast? And there's no time to chit chat because every second is money on set.
No, I've never seen you freeze up on set. I have seen the head go down and the eyes go straight to the floor and like a lot of slow pacing. Yeah. And I'm like, Chris, you all right? And you're like, I'm thinking this through. Like I've seen that, but I've never seen you freeze up. And, it's also interesting. A lot of what you're saying right now kind of, it kind of came up in my conversation with Yapchik the last time we sat down, and something that he said on the podcast, which I think is relevant and totally in line with everything you're saying, is that really you should strive to be the hardest working person on set. Especially if you're in the director's seat, because, as you've been talking about and demonstrating, by being the hardest working person on set, it naturally sets a bar. It keeps raising the bar. And the people that are going to be surrounding you, they're going to see that and want to rise to that.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I haven't directed that much, but on that 48 that I directed, I did, our crew was 18 people. It was the first time I had directed a crew of that size before, and I personally made a call to every single person that I invited on that project, and I said to them that, hey, you may or may not be the right fit for this, given the path of your career. You may or may not be the best person. Let me rephrase that. This is sounding like I said it a certain way.
No, but I get what you're getting.
No, what I'm saying is like, I'm not worried about whether you do a perfect job or not.
Yeah.
That is what I tried to tell him. What I am worried about is that you give me your 100%. If you give me 100% on everything you do, you're never going to get any flack from me, because ultimately it was my choice to bring you on. And if you give me 100% and it doesn't go right, that's not your fault. You gave me everything you had. It would have been my fault for not putting you in the right position. But I think as long as you give me everything you've got and all the energy you have, I'm going to love working with you, and you're going to love working with me. It's when people don't do that, when I start to have a problem and you start saying, well, you coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Like, no, we could have done this if you had just given 100%, or we would have. But if everyone's going 100%, you never have any regrets. And I think going back to my basketball career, I think at one point in my life, I did have a dream of going to the NBA, and I didn't make it. And at some point in my life, I realized that, I didn't have the physical skill set to be able to do that. But I have no regrets whatsoever, because I always gave it 100%. And so I sleep at night and I don't think, oh, if I just worked a little harder, I could have done this or done that. Like,
no regrets.
I know I gave everything I could. So it doesn't bother me at all. Like, I reached my potential. And if you come to terms with that, You know, as long as you keep pushing what your potential is, you're always going to be happy because you're never going to look back and say, oh, if we had just done this, you know.
So that transitions in an odd way to what you're currently working on right now, where nobody should have a problem with you on set, because it's my understanding that you're doing this next project solo dolo.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the project is, and can you tell us how this all came about?
Yes. So the project I'm working on right now is called Yesterday Is Always Here.
Mm-hmm.
It started out because of the 48. So Justin Wright was the DP on that project. He did a tremendous job with it. But we had a couple shots when we got in the editing room on Sunday that weren't working. I think we forgot the pizza box. I don't know how I overlooked that, but there's a million things going on, and you're going to get DQ'd right away if you don't have the pizza box in there. So I had to go back on Sunday and film some stuff. And Justin wasn't available because he had just committed to the Saturday. But we had to get those shots on Sunday. So I brought my camera down, and I had some members of the talent come down, and we reshot those shots. And let me tell you, those 2 or 3 shots I shot were the worst in the entire film, hands down. I've never been so embarrassed in my life directing a film and then putting those 2 shots to my name.
Yeah.
No one said anything to me, but they were bad. And so I think, you know, one of the biggest ways that you learn in life is through failure. And I think, you know, a lot of times you don't learn anything through success, but when you fail, and you fail to a point where you're embarrassed, you're going to make a change. And so it hung over my head for like 3 weeks. I don't think it had any impact on, you know, what won or where we ranked in the competition. I mean, there's 100 clips in there, and, you know, they were just, to most people, they probably didn't even pick up on it. But to me, they just stood out, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I decided, you know, this is embarrassing. It's never going to happen to me again. I'm going to learn my camera, right? So I have a Sony FX3, which, and about this time as well, I had the camera for about a year, but the Creator had just come out. If you're not familiar with the Creator, it's a sci-fi movie.
Why do I feel like AI. I should know this?
Yeah, it's he's going to hate that, not that he's listening to me, but he's going to hate that I would say this. Is Denzel Washington's son. I forget his name.
Okay.
Really interesting film, but they shot the whole film on the FX3.
Okay.
All but one shot. This is a $3,500 camera.
Okay.
This is like an $80 million movie.
So you see this movie and its quality, and, you know.
Yeah. And I said, I'm not naive. Okay. I know that like they had the best gaffers and you know, everything else. But then I watched behind the scenes and I'm like, wow, they really, this was approached like an indie film. And you thought they'd have thousands. They did not. These were very small crews. They went over in foreign places that had like in the mountains where like you would never go with a crew, and they just did it. And I was blown away. I think there's like a 20 or 30 minute BTS on it on Netflix or something, or HBO. And I said, wow, like there's literally no excuse. I mean, these guys are doing this out in the middle of the jungle with like 12 people and an FX3.
Why can't I
make an $80 million movie? Why can't I freaking do this? And so I think I just finished watching it at home, and I just, you know, every night before I brush my teeth, I look in the mirror, and I always thought there was just this cool lighting about it. And so I took my camera up there and I said, I'm going to capture this moment. And I realized it's hard to film yourself in a mirror and not see the camera. But I did it. And then I looked at it on the computer. I was like, oh, this actually looks pretty cool. Then I watched like, I think 9 straight days of YouTube videos, like after my kids went to bed, like 4 hours a night, just learning all the settings of my camera. How do I get the exposures right? Okay. Like aperture values, like all this stuff I knew and heard of tangibly, and embarrassingly enough, I didn't know how to fine tune them when I was filming.
Sure.
You know, because I'd never been a DP on anything before. You know, I'm always like, yeah, I want, you know, shallow depth of field, but like, I don't know how to achieve that with the camera. Yep. You know, I want a rack focus here, but like, I just didn't know any of the technical aspects of it. So I really learned everything about that camera. And then I went upstairs and I shot that. Same shot.
Reshoot.
Yep. And then I said, while I'm here, I'll just get a couple other ones. And I filmed like, you know, me holding the toothbrush and just have it to have it. But then I was looking at it and I'm like, all right, let me just put like a cool sound effect or track to it. And I did it. I was like, wow, this is like blowing my mind, because I never thought that I was capable of doing this myself with a camera in my hand.
But now here you are looking at a well-exposed, well-composed image.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, when you see it, you're going to say like, it's good, but it's not like, you know, it's not amazing. But for me, it absolutely blew me away. I had never done anything cinematic. I've done a lot of corporate stuff where, I'm running around with a gimbal, like, getting a worker on a lawnmower or something, a natural light. But like, I'd never filmed anything in that type of a setting and, graded it a little bit and looked at it. And I was just blown away by it. So I said, all right, I'm just going to put this little 10-second clip on Instagram just because I was like, cool, I want to show people this thing I did.
And you got good response. Yeah. Like immediately.
Yeah. Like 4 or 5 people reached out and they were like, oh, this is really cool. When's the rest of it coming? Or what's this for? Some people did it jokingly, like, what's this trailer? And then I was like, wow, like I posted a lot of stuff. I never quite got a response like this. So I said, I've just said, yeah, like some of the people I was like, yo, it's coming. Don't worry. Like just joking. And then I was like, all right, maybe I'll just keep doing this. Cause it was literally just me in the bathroom. There was the lighting was already there. It happened to be cool lighting. It's this light under a cabinet that I had installed a few years ago, but it just looked cool. So I was like, all right, it's not a big setup. I just got the camera. Then as I started to film, it just started getting a little more complex because that's how I am. I always want to push the envelope. I'm like, yeah, this was cool, but how do I make it cooler? And, I'm figuring out how to get the camera on the mirror and on the shelf and balance it. And then, I'm thinking of all these weird places to put the camera because I don't have this crazy tripod. And then, I just kept adding. Every night I would go upstairs after I put my kids to bed because there was no audio. So I didn't have to make any noise. It was just me staring in a mirror, holding a toothbrush. And I was like, all right, I'll film a couple more tonight. And then the next day I'll film a couple more. Before you know it, I had, 10, 15 clips together. And I'm like, this is starting to feel like something. This is cool.
And was that all inside the bathroom at that point?
I don't remember off the top of my head, maybe 8 or 9 clips. And then I just got outside of it to the staircase. And
well, the reason I say that is because I think you're about to talk about it, but I'm seeing, because you shared it with me, so I got a chance to see all this, and I've been watching as it's been coming out on Instagram. But you talk about kind of the simplicity of just operating in that area, and then the complexity. Introduce the snorri cam down the fucking staircase,
right? So before that, actually, there's a subtle dolly shot. I have like this $20 dolly.
Kind of looking down the stairs?
Yeah. It's $20 like dolly that I bought from the fishing show and I never used. It was just in the closet. And
is this all happening and your kids are just right?
My kids
in the
are
next
like 8
room?
feet away. I mean, I'm talking like I got to be careful I don't creak the floor. They're going to wake up.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason why it's a silent film to open, not to give anything away, but, lines do come later on. But I think, part of the reason it's a silent film in the beginning is just because I couldn't make any noise. I mean, these scenes are being filmed at 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning. My kids are sleeping in the next room, and I'm literally tiptoeing, trying to make these cool
shots.
To
set up the dolly and
so I did the dolly, and actually I think I did like 3 or 4 nights in a row of trying to get that shot because the dolly was so cheap. And that's one of the things about filming by yourself that I think is really cool. You're not afraid ever to make a mistake. There's not a whole crew around you. You're not wasting anybody's time.
Not a bunch of money on the line.
No money on the line. You can experiment. And I'll do 50 takes of it. And then the editing room is literally first floor. I walk right down, go on my computer, pop the card out, put it in. I'm like, it's not quite working. Put it back in, go back up, do it again. Keep doing it until it feels right. So there were some nights where I just did it a bunch, and then, it's 1 a.m. I'm like, I don't have the energy to get this right. I'll come back to it tomorrow. It's really frustrating, but at least you didn't waste anybody else's time.
Yeah.
And then you come back the next night and you have more energy and you're prepared to do it and it goes a lot smoother. And
you've had the day to think on it.
Yeah. And then you're like, all right, great, that works. And then you move on to the next shot. But that snorri cam shot, I think at that point in the film, I still didn't have a script. Still just going shot to shot.
Yeah, just kind of letting it evolve.
I would just say, what would be the next logical thing? I actually wasn't even asking myself that question because I didn't know where it was going. And as a writer's tip, because I do write a lot, you would never want to do that, ever. Like, you need to know your ending before you start. But this was just an exercise. And
do you now know the ending?
Oh, yes.
You do?
Oh, without question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get to a point in this story where I do know the ending. But I think at this stage, when I get to the staircase and I got the snorri cam, I don't know the ending.
Still
I don't even know what's going on downstairs. I'm just like, how do I keep this character moving and keep people engaged and make it interesting? And after I got like 9 shots in, I said, well, people might start getting bored, right? Because I'm just looking and doing things. I was like, all right, how do I make it interesting? I'll put this snorri cam on, which I just developed for Expionage. And I think,
Yep.
it ultimately is going to get used on other films down the road, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But
Well, for anybody that doesn't know, what is a snorri cam?
yeah, so it's just a camera that's mounted to your body. So it keeps yourself as always the main subject in frame, and everything else is moving around you. I'm trying to think of, I know movies that have used it.
I feel like Requiem for a Dream. I feel like it was used in Requiem for a Dream, but you came up with your own rig. Like,
yeah,
you
I came up
designed
with
your
my own rig. But yeah, it's used in a lot of films, but the places it's used you probably wouldn't recognize. I mean, the most famous one that I know of, once again going back to my favorite comedy run, there was Get Him to the Greek, or Get to the Greek. There's a scene where Jonah Hill gets stabbed with like an adrenaline needle, and he comes up and he's like all dysfunctional.
Yep.
That's what comes to mind when I think of the snorri cam. Snorri cams are expensive.
Mm-hmm. Like if you buy it from like B&H or something or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I mean they have cheap ones, but even the FX3 with the lens I was using was pretty heavy, and I didn't think that the cheap ones on B&H were going to be able to hold it. And so, when I was developing this, I was just thinking of ways how I could mount the camera to my body, well. And so I thought about a tripod because, I had seen something on, I think, Shitty Rigs, which is another great podcast. They have this podcast out there, and someone had like taped a tripod to their body. Like you couldn't move it if you wanted to. It was like duct tape to their body.
Sure.
But it held up. They never showed the footage, but I was like, there's something there to that. And so I took a tripod and I put it around my body. I said, man, this feels very natural here. The two legs come right to your side. The other one goes right between your legs. And I held it with my hands, and I was like, that camera's not going anywhere. This is a tripod. This is great. If I could just figure out how to mount it to my body, because on top of that, the legs, you can loosen them up and expand it, tilt the angle. It was like, it just felt so ergonomic. And that's where my, background and being able to build things came in, because then I was trying to figure out how to mount it. And one day I was just driving down the road and I saw a bench press out, and someone was giving it away in the front of their house.
Okay. And
it just clicked in my head. I said, oh my God, like that's it. And I took the pad off of the bench press where you lay down and push the bar. And it's built to fit right on your back. And I said, all right, now I just got to figure out how to get this tripod to mount to this bench press pad on the back. And so, and then have it hold to your body. So the first part was figuring out how to get it to hold to my body, because this bench press pad is just going to fall off your back if you try and put it there. So I thought like, these racing harness.
Yeah, kind of goes over both shoulders.
Yeah, from my background in building cars and looking at off-road racing, and I knew they weren't expensive. It was like $20 on Amazon. Yeah, and it's like a 4-point harness, and they're made to just bolt to the car. So I knew that they would just have like mounting points. So I basically, instead of bolting it to a car, I just bolted it to the bench press thing. And all right, now I got this pad on my back, and I got the tripod. All I can do is figure out how to connect them. So this is where like the average person probably couldn't do it, but I welded some bars to the bench press pad on the back so that the legs,
a T.
Yeah, like a T. So the, I'll send you some pictures after, so that it could mount, to it. And then once I had it on, I was like, wow, I outdid myself on this one, because this was so cheap to build. Yeah. I mean, I had the tripod. It's a cheap tripod, like $100 tripod. Yep. But I had that. So, I mean, I got the bench press for free. I think the harness, like I said, was $20. And the metal I bought from someone for like $50. So, somewhere between like $75 and $200, depending on if you want to count the tripod, is what that was built for. And, on a later project, we put, a very heavy camera, not a very heavy camera. We put the Red with Atlas lenses on it. Yes. Which is not, I mean, it's a light setup in terms of the cinema world, but it's not like just a small little DSLR setup. And it held just fine. It did just fine. You are talking about Kill That Man, right? Yes, I am. Yeah. That was interesting to see. When you ever brought that thing out, I was like, what in the fuck are we dealing with? And I was a little scared bringing that out, because we had just come off of Odessa, your film, and you've got the inaugural run of my 360 rig, which we'll get into in some time. But whether he says it or not on camera, like there was a lot of setup and trial and error. We had never used that thing before. I learned so much on Odessa about that rig. Yeah. I was worried when I brought that snorri cam to that other shoot that people were going to be worried it was going to have this giant setup and take forever. And I was really trying to stress in the whole pre-production, like, no, you guys, like, you won't believe how easy this thing is to set up. I can't believe it. You can put it on in like 5 seconds and you're ready to go.
Well, I remember I was your test dummy on that one. You showed up. I think we were on a lunch break, and you're like, "Here it is." I remember stepping into it. You kind of strapped it on. We got it as tight as it could go, and I think that there were a few small adjustments you had to make based on my body shape and my height, but it worked just fine. It did exactly what you were hoping it would do, and I think that I think Jimmy and Jeremy, they didn't understand what the hell you were bringing or how it would be used. But I remember talking to them about that, and they're like, it's a very interesting setup, and it's a very dynamic shot that, we kind of added flavor to that whole sequence.
Yeah, I think we'd be lying if we said that everyone knew it was going to work right out the gate, except, I know Steve was very committed to doing that shot, but I think everyone had some uneasiness as to whether it was going to work out or not. But yeah, I think having seen the film myself, I think it definitely added this really cool feature. And, it's a nice tool that I have in my arsenal now. And it's weird when I bring it out because it does look very homemade. But to people who have used it, I'm sure they'll speak to how easy it was to use and simple a setup. And it's just a really cool way to add a dynamic shot to a film, and it doesn't fit or work with everything. And hell, it might not even work in my film, Yesterday Is Always Here, but I wanted at that point in the film to just create something interesting. Because like I said, no one cares. How do you get them to care? Do something where someone goes, oh, how do you do that? Whether they like the shot or not, they might be like, oh, that's different. I don't see that every day. I'll keep watching. That's where I was at that point in the film.
I think that's a good point in the film for the hearing you kind of describe the process of just like starting with experimenting with those, shots in the bathroom, but then, okay, like we could keep going with this. I feel like that is actually a good shot at that point in the movie so far, because it does exactly what you're talking about. It gives it that, it's a dynamic shot, kind of brings a sense of unease, kind of gives it its own tone. And that, the stairwalk, it's a good section. It's kind of a nice bridge. It seems to act as a nice bridge.
And I did use it later in the film as a bridge as well, as a callback to this is a transition to the next place.
Yeah.
So it transitions from bathroom to living room to outside. I did have some other shots. And so I will say, filming it all yourself does come with some problems. I mean, obvious ones that you think about, which is like stress and you don't have time to do everything. But it really adds up. So that Snorri Cam, like, you got to keep in mind, if I want to look at playback,
you got to
disengage from it. And not to mention the way it's built, I only had an inch on each side to fit through the door frame because it's a T.
Really?
And if I hit the wall, you can't hesitate because it shows on camera. If you're like, oh, I think I'll make it through the door, you can't do that. You got to commit like you're going downstairs. And when you commit and you're going downstairs and you hit that door frame with a solid steel beam coming out the side, it's going to wake up your whole house.
Yeah, so the pressure's on.
I'd done it a couple times, and I think my wife was like, what are you doing? Like, it was like, I'm going to wake up my kids, and I'm like, shit. Like, there's things that, like, you don't see when you watch the movie, but, like, there's some of these things were way more involved than you think. And so I really only did a few takes, and I still didn't quite know what I was going to do with the lighting because I hadn't scripted it out. And so the lighting's all messed. I had to do a lot in post to get that even usable. I mean, my exposure is just so far lower than it should have been because I still didn't know exposure at that point, and I'm still learning it. But that's one thing about this film is it's baptism by fire with exposures. I think as you watch it, I'm recognizing what and when the problems are, and I'm like, oh man, when I get in the editing room, I'm like, I can't see any detail in this shot. Like, what was I doing wrong? And then I'm like, okay, now I'm shooting an S-Log on a Sony FX3, I should probably be a stop or two below so I can get some more light and then just bring it down in post. And, sometimes understanding that the Atmos screen that I'm looking at is maybe a little brighter. And then, so these are a lot of things I was learning as I was going, but, I was determined to just keep going and let it get better over time. And unless it was egregiously bad, I was going to live with it and keep moving. Because I could spend all day on one shot.
So that Snorri Cam shot that you're discussing, the one that's actually in what I've seen so far, that is what you got on the day. That's not something, because you were talking about earlier, kind of in the process, specifically with the dolly, where it's like, okay, you tried it a few times that night, ran out of time, came back to it. that shot with the snorri cam, you didn't touch again except for in
No,
post?
there are some shots where it's just so involved that you just have to move on, because the thought of coming back and doing all that again. I mean, getting into that rig, getting that camera set up, like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And so, and it's in the summer and I'm sweating.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about waking up my kids. And it's like, it's a really complex shot. And for me at that time, thinking about doing that again till 2 a.m, I was like, you know what? I can live with this. I'll move on. I'll pick my battles in other places.
Well, it honestly can't be. I don't know if it's exactly the next shot, but it can't be more complicated than the one that we should be talking about now with the 360 rig.
Yeah.
That I watched it on your Instagram a few times, went through your story, and then as I was getting ready for this interview, I started going through again, and I sat with that, and I don't know if it was on the Instagram post or if it's in the email that you sent me prior to getting here, but can you elaborate on what the shot is and how you achieved it? Because I watched it through a few times and it's pretty flawless.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking flawless, dude.
Yeah. Well, I had Steve help me on that shot. But I think,
that was the one shot where
he's helped me on a couple, but I've filmed, I think 31 sessions, 26 or 27 have been nobody but me.
And this has been over a year.
This has been over a year now. Yeah. Or about coming up on a year. I'm hoping to finish right around when I started. But on this one, there was just no way. I had thought about a way to do it myself.
Of course.
And this was when I really had to make a decision as to, I already had the shot in my head. Thought it was the coolest thing I come up with. And I said, you can either not have this look good and do it yourself and have it kind of be like the staircase one, or you can bring someone in to just do the simplest thing. I don't want to underplay what Steve did. He did an amazing job, but have it all set up, but just like, I can't physically be the one slowing down the camera and racking the focus. There's just no way. The camera is more than arm's length away from me. I have to have it move around my head. So I said, I'll bring in Steve. It did take a lot of takes, but it has nothing to do with Steve. It just was, I didn't even have
a complex shot.
He's manually rack focusing, I think 2 or 3 times in there. Wow. What you don't see in the shot, I wish we had a GoPro set up.
Just capturing what you guys were up to.
Yeah, it's really hard to explain in just words without seeing it. But basically, the 360 rig is mounted on a wooden beam in my living room. My wife loved that. Basically, I put 2 wooden I put a shelf on each side of the room. The room's about 11 feet wide. I put 2 wooden shelves up, and then I built this really solid wood beam that went across the 2 shelves. So if you picture a beam at the top of your house that just goes across the room, that's pretty much what it was. But because it was on 2 shelves, I could slide it, because anything you build for film needs to be somewhat customizable. If I just screwed it in and then all of a sudden it's just a hair off, like I have to unscrew everything. So we made it so the beam could sit on those 2 shelves and slide. I had like 3 feet of leeway either way. And then I have this arm that comes down that swings not too different from something like this from the ceiling, and you could basically hit it and it'll spin around 360 degrees.
So just for clarity, so you've got this beam up here, pole, sitting down here, and then at the edge, you've got, it can spin.
Yeah.
And you can mount a camera on it.
Yep. Comes right down. This beam comes right down from the wood beam, this metal pole. And then there's this rotating metal piece here, which I won't get too technical on. And then an arm comes out from it and down with the camera. So basically, if you hit it, it spins all the way around me, or you can move it manually. And so the camera would start in this shot, starts behind me, and it's got to initiate somehow. It's at arm's reach, and plus, if I were to hit it, you would see my arm move. So I use my wife, who actually initiates the movement of the camera. She's at the front door, and I'm in front of a record player, much like this. I'm looking down at it. She's behind me. The camera's here. So she initiates the movement, and it comes around me. And as it gets here, it's pointing at where Steve is going to be to catch the camera. So he actually has to be crouching on the ground. So you don't see him, in camera. It keeps coming around, and when it gets here, it would have seen my wife. Now you would say, oh, my wife could just leave the room after she started the camera, but she can't, because she has to be the one to open the door. So when the camera comes around, the door is shut. My front door is shut. And she's down. She started it. She jumps down to the ground. So camera comes around. She's below it, so you can't tell she's there. And then it stops. Steve pops up.
Behind the camera.
Slows it down and catches it while rack focusing to a clock that is down the hallway. And then, I kind of noticed the clock, and Steve slowly walks the device back. And now my wife on the floor, out of frame, opens the front door as Steve racks to the door to show that it's open. Very, very complex. I mean, it was like watching a Rube Goldberg machine in action. It was really funny how we were popping up and jumping down and moving. And I think, technically there were only a few takes that just like we didn't get the focus shift right or whatever. I think most of it was performance based on my end. But I had done a lot of tests with, I had this Sasquatch head. It's pretty funny. I got the footage of it. I had done a lot of tests with it because if I wasn't the subject of it, I could do all the testing, right? So I basically had a dummy there and I did all the movements and got it to where I wanted to be so that when people came, I said, listen, just slow it down here.
I've already figured this out.
Yeah. And Steve brought some definite insight, and I think we maybe even made some adjustments based on what he said, but ultimately it's very close to what my test footage would have been. And I'm very happy with the shot, but I already had the 360 rig, but I did have to build the beam and all the testing. And then, we probably only spent like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours
actually shooting
and prepping and like, standing in and stuff. But I think, it's probably 15, 20 hours all said and done for that one shot.
Yep.
But that's definitely, at least for me, the best shot I've personally ever put on camera. And I just happen to be the subject. I don't care if I'm the subject or not, but it's really cool for me. And it's something that garnered a lot of attention for my film on social media. Once again, no one cares. How do you get them to care? Right. Mm-hmm. So I think showing that rig along with the shot and explaining how it was done, a lot of people, reacted to it. And I think it garnered a lot of attention for what I had going on. I mean, granted, it kind of bucked what I was trying to do, where it was like, everything is just myself. Mm-hmm. Right. And I thought about a way to do it myself. Don't get me wrong. I would have had to been on a platform.
I have no doubt.
I would have had to been on a platform.
Yeah.
I was going to rent a follow focus because you don't see my hands. I was going to have it down here. I was going to have a stick so that I could start it, slow it down as it came around, use the follow focus to rack, come back, and then kick it a little bit. And then as it was moving, have something I could pull to open. But like I said, it would have turned a 20-hour thing into a 100-hour thing. And then for what, right? For this cool shot where people go, oh my God, how'd this guy do it himself? Like, that's cool. But like, I'm trying to make, at this point, I'm like, all right, this is going to be something I wanted to make a film. So like, yeah, I mean, is it a cop-out? No, because it was still really, really, really involved. But yeah, that was the first time where I really had to make a decision. Like,
am I in this alone?
Do I want to hold to like literally this just being me?
Yeah.
No exceptions. Or like, all right, I'll cheat a couple places where like I feel like it's warranted, and that was one of those places for sure.
I definitely feel like it was warranted. I mean, it's pretty impressive what you've already done, and what we can get into on the back end. But like, that shot is technically proficient. The focus, when it lands, everything. So I think that having a little bit of help on that one was probably the right decision.
And I think one thing we haven't touched on with this film in particular yet is one thing I wanted to do, given that I didn't have a lot of money for this. One, it helps doing it all yourself, but the lighting, right? I didn't have an expensive lighting package because
this is just stuff you already owned, or
stuff I already owned. I mean, there's a couple times where I've gone to a rental house, but I live an hour and a half from the rental house. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I drove all the way to High Output once. There's Mambo Combo Stand. Mm-hmm. It's like a $20 rental. Mm-hmm. They're like, yeah, you could just rent, like just bring it back whenever. Like that's how small the order was.
Yeah,
you know? And it's like, to be able to put a light 30 feet up in the air, and it's like, and yeah, I know we'll get into that. It's another crazy thing, but the majority of this film, I think, maybe overshadowed by my inability to get my exposures right, but it's not because of the lighting isn't there. It's just, maybe I didn't have the lighting just quite bright enough, or my exposure wasn't set right. But this whole film is really with these small little aperture bulbs, which are like $70. I have 3 of them. Mm-hmm. And I put them all in. I was very cognizant every scene to make sure I had somewhere I could put a practical light. And so I'm using these bulbs to create the light in the room. And the Sony FX3 is very good in low light conditions. It's the one thing I had going for me. So, I mean, everything I've done has required nothing than some aperture bulbs and, tubes. And the tube I use is like an $80 3-foot RGB tube that I got on B&H. You can get on Amazon. That's made by Nanlite. I got a couple of those. And like, yeah, I borrowed Steve's later on, but it very well could have been mine. I just wanted to use ones that we had used for consistency. But The only time I used a very powerful light was when I was trying to create moonlight outside.
Yeah, do your neighbors think you're crazy?
Do you
have close neighbors?
Yeah. They came out. So as I mentioned, this is after my kids go to bed. So a lot of times filming this at 2, 3 in the morning. And so I needed to get the light really high to make moonlight. And I do have a very powerful light. It's an expensive light. It's like a $2,000 light. But let me tell you, you did not need that light to do what I did. I had it on maybe 3 to 5% of what it could have done. So you could have used a light that's probably like $200 tops to do what I did. What I had was overkill. But I did have to rent the stand, which allowed me to go like 20 feet up, which still wasn't high enough. I set it on the highest end of my property, which was still not high enough. So then
this was all to replicate moonlight. Correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
So then I backed my pickup truck up to the highest point of my yard. And then I put the stand in the back of the pickup truck on top of the cover of the back of the pickup truck. So I had to put a piece of plywood down so that the tonneau cover or whatever didn't like cave in.
Yeah.
So that got me like another 6 feet. So it's roughly 30 feet in the air, which is as good as I was going to get on something that's only going to cost me $20 to rent a stand. The thing that was scary was if the pole went down, it would have hit the power lines. It would have been really a bad situation. Nothing I would have ever done with other people on set. I'm very good at walking the line with myself. And if that thing started to move, I would have just hit the ground and run. Like I wouldn't have tried to catch it. But I would never do that with other people on set. But I was willing to roll the dice with myself. I never did. There's some windy days where I was like, shit, I want to film today. But I can't because I'm not going to risk that thing hitting the power lines.
Yeah.
So I have this globe like diffusion that I put up there, and I'm very happy with what I got out of it for budget moonlight. In fact,
it looks great on camera, by the way. I mean, at least in the export that I've seen. I mean,
I would definitely use it on a higher budget film if I could get it a little bit higher. I feel very comfortable with I've learned a lot about what I could do better with that same setup. And I feel like I could really do some really high level things with that setup. And maybe it wasn't quite dialed in when I did it myself. But like I said, looking back, I would feel comfortable going to something of a higher, not giant budget, but higher budget than what I worked on, saying, hey, this is a way to do moonlight if you want to try it. There are some limitations to it, but.
Sure. Well, that's really what's, I don't know if you've expressly stated this, but what I'm getting at is you're almost on a one-man mission to, say, fuck the budget. Like, we'll make a feature, but I've already learned, I've done the trials and tribulations. Like, here's my solution. Like, we can do this. Because seriously, they always say that when you're making a movie, the wider the shot, the more expensive it is, to produce, whether that be the light in the background, set design, it's a bigger canvas with which you're painting on. So you've got a lot more money that's eventually going to go into it. But what you demonstrated when you did your moonlight shot outside, it's really well lit, man. I know that you're your biggest critic, but it looks great. And I watched it a few times and I was like, holy shit. I mean, this could be a professional. It could be like a professionally budgeted movie, so to speak. Not to, I didn't mean anything by that, but it looks.
It was all there for the taking. If I had the people to dial it in, it could have been on the level that would meet or exceed anything that I'm capable of.
Yeah,
there were limitations because I was doing it all myself and I don't have the knowledge. But the tools were all there. The sets were there. Everything was there. It's just, could I dial it into the level it needed to be at? No, because I'm just not experienced at doing every role on set, being a gaffer, being a DP, running sound. Like some of these things were really like, I learned the hard way on a lot of things. I mean,
have you been integrating sound? I mean, obviously there is sound in the movie, but I'm wondering how much of that's coming from your post experimenting.
Yeah. So because there's no talking for the first 6 minutes of the film, it's all post. I actually started kind of a personal challenge that I could do it all with stock as opposed to Foleying it.
Okay.
Because I wanted to hone my skill set on finding stock sounds too. Because Foleying is the right way to do it. And in my opinion, at times it was going to be the easier way to do it. And I wanted to say, all right, how do I describe what this sound is? How do I find it? And I took a challenge on like, all right, I know what this is supposed to sound like, but what does it mean in words? How do I find it on the internet? So there were a lot of things I learned about different types of rises and different, what's a clank versus a clink on the internet. And like, I learned a lot about that. And I think I can use that in my arsenal moving forward. Hopefully I can Foley everything all the time. That would be ideal and never have to use stock. But, there are certainly some things I Foleyed in there. But yeah, so, you've only seen the first half. The second half, it does have dialogue.
Does it introduce I feel like I can't ask this, but I got to. Does it introduce another version of yourself?
Oh, we can't get into that by any means. You'll get nothing from me on the second half other than there is talent more than just myself, and there is sound and lines in there, which is difficult because let me just think back. Yeah, there were a couple days where I did have Steve to help me a little bit. But sometimes it was me with just a microphone, which is tough. So I think
and are you finding there to be a learning curve? Because obviously you've dealt with sound, in your work as in marketing and whatnot in those productions. But are you finding any kind of a specific learning curve now that you're doing it for a more narrative based project?
I think it's different because I've always had someone running sound.
Okay.
And for me, even when I've been a director or producer, it's always been, hey, that sound good?
Yeah.
Can I get a run back on that? Let me hear it.
Yep.
It's never been like, oh, why is this fucked up?
Yep.
Okay. Now
you're going through that interrogation process.
It's not close enough to him, or we're in a room with echo, or I bumped the stick, and now it's like, now I think about all these things that I never would have thought about before.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to say that. Like, I think I've produced and been a part of some really, really high level stuff, but I've never had to think because I've always hired the professional. And part of the reason of me doing this project is to really just gain a better understanding so that when I do ask someone to do something for me, I know what goes into it. Like all these little things come up. I mean, I hire wardrobe and it's like, great, that person's great. They found what I wanted, but like what goes into that? Like you think until you go into the thrift store 19 times for one person's outfit and you find 4 of the perfect shirts, but it's the wrong freaking size. Or you get it, it's the right size, it doesn't fit them all of a sudden, you got to have backups.
Or it doesn't fit them the way that you thought it would.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so like I have such a greater appreciation for that now, having done it all, and that applies to every single role that I've done on this set. I just I have such a greater appreciation for what everyone does on set, even like props and the production design. Very early on, there was almost no production design. And like I said, without giving too much away, but I've shared it on Instagram, like this second half of this film, it's like more of like a period piece type design. And so every single prop, every decision I made had to be of the genre that I chose there. And so
and from what I've seen, you've been really, I mean, I haven't looked into each, prop or piece of set dressing that you've put in there, but you've been pretty generous with giving information about those pieces. I mean, the photos look fantastic, man. It seems like you've really got kind of a nice color palette. There's a nice texture to it all. It kind of really brings you into this world wherever that is taking us.
Wherever it is. I think for me it was my first real big step into anything that was period related. I've done a good amount of, production design throughout my career, whether it be corporate or narrative. But this was really the first time where, I was like looking at things like the outlet on the wall. And it's like, oh, that doesn't look like it's right. Now I have to go find a new plate for that outlet or a switch or, okay, well, this molding doesn't quite work, or the doors, right? So there's like these white doors. My house is from like the 90s, and it's just like I had to go find doors. Not only doors that fit, right? Because I wasn't going to do a bunch of construction.
And now, is all of this stemming from another creative challenge, or when you were in the process of actually coming up with a narrative for this project, did you find yourself being? Was it the story or the inclination to get creative on the production side of it?
The story drove it.
The story drove it.
Yeah, the story drove it. I would not have probably chosen that path had the story not driven it. And it was one of those things. Once the story went there, I wasn't going to let up. I was going to push the envelope of what could be done by myself to make this look the way I wanted to look. And was it inefficient? Tremendously.
Why do you say that?
Because some subtle things that I had in the script maybe didn't have to be in there that caused a lot of work on the back end. But then once I was there, I was like, yeah, who cares? Like, it's going to make it cooler, even though like people don't realize maybe how easy this could have been cut or not done. Like, now that I'm doing it, like there's no way I'm going back without this. And so, yeah, I want to say it was 2 or 3 minutes into the film where I said, okay, like I can't just keep like, what's next? I was like, I gotta figure out.
Gotta kind of up the ante.
It was the just after the 360 shot, the door opens, I go outside, I see a chest. I still at that point did not know where the story was going to go.
But then when you open the chest and you find the letter, that kind of was maybe the spark that
letter,
takes you.
The letter, there's a couple shots before the letter where I decided the script. And I basically wrote the whole script out at that point. And
did it just come out of you? Like,
yeah, well, I was like, the scene is me looking at the chest with a flashlight. Mm-hmm. And it feels like a culminating moment in the film at that point. And I was like, you can't just have this go to the next moment. Mm-hmm. People are looking at this chest. A lot of people are like, I can't wait to see what's in the chest. Like, people are messaging me because we haven't said it yet, but I would share the cut every time I put in a new clip. Yep. So I've shared the film maybe 25 times
on Instagram.
On Instagram every time it gets a new clip. So people watch it again. They're probably sick of seeing my face, and they're like, all right, what are the next 2 or 3 shots he's adding?
Can I actually ask you about that? Yeah. So I think it's very interesting, kind of the landscape that we're in nowadays. I mean, it used to be, I don't think it's any secret, but it used to be that, the cinema, going to a movie, the big screen, like getting through those gatekeepers and getting to an audience that way, that was like the pinnacle of success for a filmmaker. Nowadays, it kind of feels like there are no gatekeepers. The internet and all the tools we have at our hands have just made it so easy to create your piece of art and get it out into the public. But you are doing something that I find really cool, is that you're experimenting with long form narrative content, but you're also engaging the audience as it's being made. So what do you make of that? Was that all just happenstance the way that happened, or was that kind of a deliberate thing as you were going into it?
Given my marketing background, I kind of said, this is how I'm going to do it. I had even toyed with, as at least our genre knows, when you're kids, there were books where you could decide what you were going to do next. Mm-hmm. And then flip to that page and read the story as if you had made that decision. Yep. I had toyed with making a film that way.
Okay.
But then I just decided it was just going to be too much open can of worms on top of doing it all myself. I said, I'll just stick to what I'm doing. But I realized that, the average person doesn't care about what I'm doing. They just don't. Until they see the finished product, they don't care. Like, there's so many other things they could consume that are so much better.
Do you actually believe that, though? Because I find that hard to believe, considering how much feedback you've gotten on all of the behind the scenes stuff.
Well, yes. So here's my secret. So I'm going to tell you. I realized that in the world we live in, everyone wants to be a creator. Mm-hmm. Everybody. Talk to a 5-year-old kid, they want to be a YouTube star. Right?
Sure.
Everybody wants to create stuff. No one knows how. They all want to be a movie star. They all want to be a YouTube star, but nobody knows how to do it. Even myself with the fishing show and the car show. Until I got into the film world, I had no idea what I was doing. And so your stuff is just going to be like everybody else's. So as a filmmaker, someone who's interested in making creative work, you're going to be drawn to seeing how it's done, because it's a lot of times hidden, or it's not available to the average person to really understand how some of this stuff is done. And so I said, wow, there's going to be a lot of people that want to make their own movie or want to make their own YouTube channel.
Let me show them how.
They don't have the network that I have. Even though you could go get it, don't get me wrong. I'm a firm believer in, like, you got no excuse. Like, go volunteer on a film set, talk to people, be around it, you'll learn, right? Yeah. You have no excuse. But for the people who that hasn't clicked in their head yet, and they're like, oh my God, all right, that's how he did this, that's how he did that. He's doing it on his own. I can do it on my own. A lot of people reach out to me, inspire them to do their own stuff, or mentioned they started doing it and they've, gotten a resurgence and interested in picking back up on it, or like, even if it's just a few people, it's really empowering to hear that. But I knew that was going to be my angle, reaching out to people who wanted to be creators, wanted to be filmmakers. My market is not anyone who's in the industry. Mm-hmm. They're once again, they don't care, right? They're just on a higher level, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who aren't at the level that even that's at yet, right? So I have a bar that I want to attain. And for some people, where I'm at on that film is their bar right now. And so there's a lot of people just getting into film where they look at what I've done, they go, wow, that looks really good. How do I do that? And they're going to be really interested to learn, And so I knew that was going to be my market. I think that a lot of my followers are those people. They're filmmakers, they're creators. They're not an average person going, oh, I love this story. I think when the film is done, I know it's going to connect with those people, and then they'll care. But, you know, I also know that it's really hard to just market a finished film. So I was like, how do I get a following before the film is done, so that when I do a film, that you have this core network of people that believe in it and want to support it, so that it can help reach the people who don't care and suddenly will care, because nothing draws a crowd like a crowd. So I've built the following on, you know, people who want to be creators and think what I'm doing is cool, and they want to do that, or on the level I'm doing it at, or maybe they are above what I'm capable of doing. They just think it's interesting that I'm trying to one-man band it. But that's really my audience right now. And then when the film is done, I do intend to make a shift towards, you know, trying to reach the average person that doesn't care about how films are made. They're just interested in seeing cool stories and cool movies. And I think I can do that when I have a film that already has, you know, some followers to it, where they go, well, what's this going on over here? Like, they're maybe overlook the first, you know, few things that aren't perfect because they see something's going on. And then once they get into it, hopefully I've done a good enough job in writing it that they're like, I want to see the rest of this, you know, watch it all the way through.
I've been having this conversation with my producing partners, Alex and Jimmy, for over a year and a half. It's like the industry shut down, and, you know, we kind of collectively were like, well, there's got to be a different way to approach it, because it's certainly no mystery that, you know, between the short films that we did, we sank, this is probably a lot of my doing, but we sank a lot of money into them. And I just, you know, I haven't been creatively inspired as of late, because I'm trying to think, like, what's that next thing? And that's why I like talking with you, because you're approaching it in a very different way. You're approaching it with little to no money. You are doing all the work. It's kind of this natural progression of ideas and curiosities that's leading this drive. And it's also very cool because you're experimenting with the format with which you engage your audience. You know, it's not just this thing of trying to break through. Like, I think, to your point, there's like this myth out there of like the Paul Thomas Anderson route, where it's like, oh, you know, young filmmaker makes really awesome short film that gets the attention of, you know, Khan and all these other directors, and they're like, we want to give you money to make your first independent. That's like not really how it works anymore. Or if it does, it's a very rare breed. You know, you can point to 100 different examples, but for the most part, the majority of people, you got to find interesting, creative ways of doing it, and, you know, really learn the craft. So that's why I think what you're doing is so fucking cool. Yeah,
it's definitely a budget related thing. And for me, it was just, it's about getting something that's good enough where I can take that next step. You know, I think.
What do you imagine that next step being? If you
taking on a larger budget, I think, you know, I do want to make very, very large films, but I'm also a business person. I've run a business. Like, no one's going to give me money looking at, you know, just a few films that I've been a part of. Like, they're going to be like, all right, what have you actually done that's yours? And unless I want to go spend, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars, it's really hard to make something where someone's going to go, oh, okay, I can see the potential in this. All right, why don't you do a couple more things and come back to me when you get someone a little more polished?
Yeah.
Right? Because if I go with someone with them that's like not even close, they're never going to talk to me again.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I want to have something that is of the level that I don't feel embarrassed by, and something that people can see and go, when they hear that I did it all by myself, they're going to go, oh, wow. If he had a crew, he might be able to do something really good. And, you know, not only that, but now, you know, when I try and ask for crew members to join my project, you know, and be a part of something, and it's not always just about the money game every time, how much are you paying me or whatever. It's okay, I've seen something you've done. I see the potential that's there. I feel like if you're putting together something with a crew, it can be really good. And I believe in the story that you put together because I've seen what you've done. And I think it has to be done on a certain level. Like, even really good stories, like if they're really poorly produced, it's really hard to overcome that like first look when you look at something and go, oh God, like I'm not going to sit through this, even if it's the best story ever.
It's true.
So it's just got to be at a certain bar. And I feel like this film is at least hitting that bar. and it's not where I want it to be ultimately if I had a whole crew, but I feel like it is enough where people go, wow, okay, so Chris knows what he's doing, and okay, now when he wants to have a crew, he wants to do something, like I'm going to be a part of that because I know it can only go up. This is the floor. That's the way I look at it. If I do everything myself, this film is the floor of my career. That's how I look at it. This is the floor. And if this is the floor, it's a damn good floor for me, and I really want to shoot for the moon. And so, yeah, it is a stepping stone film for me, but it's also, even though I didn't have it scripted for the first 2 minutes, it's a story that I really feel passionate about, and I'm really excited to share with the world. And I think that's part of why I got into filmmaking, is just I feel like I'm a good storyteller, and I feel like I have a way of looking at the world that's not always the same way that everyone else does.
I can attest to that.
And I think, with those two things, if I can just get all the people that are really technically sound, and, I don't have to do everything, I feel like I want to find everyone as I continue to move through these films in my career. I'm always looking for people that I feel like are the person for when I do a film, where I can just say, this is my vision, take it and do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't feel like I can do that with you, you're probably not going to be with me long term. My goal is to find that person in every role in a set. And I think once I have that, I don't want to micromanage everybody. I want to know that this person's a killer in this department. And like, I'm going to give you my vision, and I know that you're just going to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get all those people together, you can make something really good, but the story has to be there. The script has to be there. And I'm, reading books on writing every day, and I'm learning a lot about it. And
are you writing anything currently? Are you looking ahead to what the next project is?
I have 2 films. The problem is I get very attached to them, and I don't want to do them low budget because they do call for higher budgets.
Sure.
And, I've toyed with making 5 or 10 minute segments of some of these scripts I'm working on. But they're not finished yet either. So I don't want to get too far ahead of the game, but I think everyone says this, it becomes cliche. I've got it all up in my head. I just got to figure out how to convey it the right way. And I know that if I can convey it, they'll resonate. And, even Yesterday Is Always Here, even though I love the story and the script that I've done, it's still going to be somewhat imperfect because I did start filming it without having a script. And so I did have to fit parts of it to what I had already filmed. I wasn't going to go back and start over.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know the ending, you shouldn't start filming. You shouldn't start writing, because it all has to lead to what your ending is. And so the first 2 minutes were done without leading to anything. And I had to figure out something they could lead to. And I did that. And I love the story, and I think it's going to connect with people. But there are still going to be, I'm already mentally preparing for some of the questions where people go, why'd you do that? Well, I did that because the script wasn't written yet.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make 2 pieces meet. But I think it definitely all works. I've really thought it through. So,
well, I think the story about how this one specifically comes about, I mean, that's that.
Yeah.
It's almost more interesting than the question of, well, why'd you do it this way? It's like, well, I got a really good reason. Buckle up. So let me ask you, what's the timeline? What are you expecting? I know that when we were texting and emailing back and forth, you had said that, you're coming up on the year mark, having worked on this project. You said you're 31 sessions in, or you're doing 31 sessions total?
I'm 31 in.
And you're coming close to the end.
Yeah, I would say I would like to be able to do it in 3. Do I think it's going to be 4? Probably.
4 more sessions? 3, 4?
And when I say 4, like, people are like, oh my God, you filmed 31 times? Like, yeah, I guess that is a lot, but like, these aren't like 8, 10-hour days. Some of these were 1-hour sessions. Some of these were 4-hour sessions. Yeah, when I had talent there, they were, 4.5-hour sessions. I still didn't even go that long with talent. These are all that's what I like about it. It's all digestible. And the thing that is a huge advantage to telling a story this way, you do need to have a script before. Don't get me wrong. But filming it one piece at a time. So you film the piece, and then the next day, like Saturday, you're tired or whatever, you take a nap, you wake up and you start editing it. Now you can spend 3 hours editing that one clip. The sound design, the coloring, everything. You don't get tired. When you're trying to do it all at once, you're going to get somewhat burnt out. You're going to have to take breaks, whatever. Like, when you're literally only editing 1-3 clips max the next day, you really can get to take your time on post. And you can take your time. You're not worrying about anything. And on top of that, yes, you have your shot list and your vision and what you're going to film the next day. But now when you're working or you're driving, you're thinking about it all day, and you're like, oh, wow, I could improve it if I did this. Or all of a sudden, like, You know, maybe you thought you had it perfect, and then a couple days go by in your next filming session, or you have the whole week if you're only filming on the weekends, and you're like, wow, this would be much better if I just did this. Or one day you wake up and you're like, I can't believe I didn't think of this. Whereas like try and do it all in one shot. It's not always there, but now you're giving every moment, you know, 3 days, sometimes a couple weeks to let it breathe before you really decide, is this the shot I'm going with next? And it really lets you make much better decisions. And I found that when I had the longer days with talent, because I can't waste their time, have them come back 20 times for an hour session. You know, I found that it stressed me out a little bit because I couldn't quite do that. I had to really have 15, 30 shots, like, boom, booked out. And I really couldn't veer from it because the time wasn't there. And so that was bringing me back to reality a little bit, and being on this little cushy mountain of not worrying about wasting anybody's time. You could take 3 weeks to think about the shot. You could do it. No, now it's like boom, 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 boom.
Stakes are a little bit higher.
Yeah. So, and I do feel that when I watch it, I'm like, man, if I was able to spread this over 2 months, this would be so much better. But that's the reality of filmmaking. And so it's just another one of the things I'm learning. But when you film it all yourself, you star in it yourself, it's going to be incredibly stressful, tiring. You're going to have full creative control. You can't blame anybody but yourself. And you know, you can take it at the pace that you want to take it at.
So what's the pace going to be with the edit? So once you finish,
well, I mean, the editing, I've been going
almost done.
Yeah. So these sessions,
you're getting it into
I would edit before I film next. You've never
moved on until you're satisfied with the edit.
Yeah, at least to a 90% level.
Oh, that's fucking crazy, man.
Yeah, so
that's cool way to work though.
Yeah, because the other thing is too, like you're putting in, a real big shoot, you'd have it scored to the track, right? Yeah. I don't have that luxury. I'm not going to pay someone. I don't want to bring anyone else in, so I got to find stock tracks.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're trying to fit the stock track to the footage you've had, right?
Sure. That makes sense.
If I have a track I really love, and I love the way it ebbs and flows, and I know I can massage the way I shoot something by just a few seconds to make it peak at the perfect time. Now I know that going into the shot. I have the track already laid in, and I go, okay, this shot should be about 4 seconds. And you don't want to sacrifice the story for it, but you can amplify that moment so much more knowing exactly what's going on. And like, okay, maybe normally I would have only had this take 3.5 seconds, but I'm going to let it take 4.5 because I know that I've got this track. I don't have to do any work to it. It's going to peak at just the right time.
Yeah.
Did that so many times on this film, and it saves so much money and energy because you already know where that track's going, and you know the moments, and you just kind of like getting them to mesh together. And instead of like, how do I make this all work in the edit? It's like you film it, you take the card out and you put it on the track and you're like, it's a half a second too slow. I'll just go do it again. And then you're like, time's up, perfect. Now I don't have to do any editing on the track, and it saves so many headaches. And that's one of the advantages. That's what I'm saying. I really recommend it in some regards. I don't recommend doing a 10, 12-minute short like I'm doing. Like it's really taxing. But if you did something like 2 to 5 minutes, I recommend it for any filmmaker out there, not just to learn all the tricks of the trade, but it just allows you to be so creatively free. And, you know, you never have to worry about like, oh, this person doesn't quite believe in this, or, you know, like, so I have to convince someone to do this. Like, you're just going to do it. The thing is, like I said, there's nowhere to hide. You can't pin it on anybody either. You have to be real with yourself. Like if it sucks, it's because you freaking made it suck. Like there's nowhere to hide. You can't point fingers and say, oh, I could have been here or that. To quote Rocky, by the way. The newer one, I think it was Rocky Balboa was the movie. He says, you don't want to be pointing fingers saying I'm not here because of this or that, or whatever, talking about his son living in his shadow. It's true. Like you got nowhere to hide when you make your own film. And so it lives and dies on me. And I think that pushes me to work harder too. I mean, there's some things I live with. Like I said, the one staircase one, I just wasn't going to do it again. It was so stressful and tiring. I said, it's not a pivotal moment. Like there's some shots in there, 360. I would have done that 40 days in a row to get that shot after the time I put into it.
I'm going to talk to you in like 3 months when this is all wrapped up, and you're going to be like, that fucking stair snorri shot. I should have gone back.
No, there's a lot of shots. I'd say, if there's 100 shots in there right now, there's probably, 10 where I'm like, I should really redo that. And there's another 10 where it's like, I can live with that. And then the rest I'm like, okay. And there's only a couple where I'm like, wow, that blows me away. But you know what? Like I can't spend my whole career on this film. It was an exercise. It's going to be a beautiful film. I can't wait to put it in, once I polish it all up with the color and the final sound. I can't wait to put it into festivals. It's nothing that I intend to turn into a feature or anything at any point. But it's something I can always look back on. And the thing I like about it is I put a lot of my own personal props in there.
Yeah.
And something that's funny is like I have a lot of these things in my house. I'm always worried about them breaking, right? There's a clock that's featured in there. I'm just worried about breaking. You know, it's been in my family. I'm like, you know, what if it falls off the wall one day? Well, now it's memorialized in a film, which is cool because
so
it's always there.
Of flexibility if it does break.
Yeah, like all of a sudden I'm not scared because I'm like, wow, like that chest. You know, if my daughter jumps on it and it breaks and caves in, like, well, now it's featured in a film. So like, I just feel it. I don't know. It's weird. It's just cool to me to have these things that I've always had in my house. And you're not supposed to do that like in film. Like you're supposed to write to the story. But like, I wrote all these props in because they were just cool. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, like when they see them, they go, oh, that's cool. There's a flashlight in there that's like 70 years old. It just looks
cool. Flashlight.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's the only reason it's in there. It looks cool. It's like I found it at a flea market and I work it into the story and
then you make it work into the story. I mean, I thought that if you hadn't just said that, I would have said that you had planned that prop to be in there because it naturally segues into a couple of the segments. Yeah, I was like, I wanted a flashlight. But flashlights are boring. I was having this conversation actually, a little side topic, like flashlights are all over film, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody uses flashlights in real life. I think it's hilarious. Like how many people have flashlights in their drawer nowadays? Like nobody like does that, but yet they're used all the time in film, which I think is so funny. And I realized that because I was like, oh, this flashlight's so old. It's going to be like it's going to look a little odd. Well, they're all
then
on
I'm
their
like,
phone.
Like everybody uses their phone. Like flashlight is an antiquated concept anyways. And so if you're going to use it, at least choose a cool one. And I think that's one of the coolest flashlights I've ever seen. And like, I just walked by, at a flea market. I go to a lot of flea markets and antique shops and I find a lot of inspiration from things I've seen. In fact, without getting into detail, I saw something recently at a flea market. I put it on my Instagram story. If you saw it, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But it is something that was quasi in my mind about a film that I'm writing. And now there's no way the film's happening without that particular item. And it's something that's older and cool. And yeah, maybe 40 years ago, people wouldn't have batted an eye at it. But now you see it and you're like, oh, that's just cool. That's like, I've never seen someone with that styling. It's like this chair I'm sitting in, right? Like 30 years ago, no one was caring about mid-century furniture. It was just 20, 30 years old. It was boring.
And now you're writing in your head a story around these.
Yeah, now it's all coming back into style because people are like, that's cool. Yeah. And I think, a lot of stuff from the 80s and 90s, a lot of stuff in my film is older, 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't have so much 80s and 90s in there. But there's going to come that wave where a lot of stuff from the 80s and 90s starts to become really trendy. I just watched, it's funny, actually, I won't get into that because it'll kind of give away some stuff about my film. But I think, it was an exercise turned film, and now I'm really excited to wrap it up because now it's a story. Mm-hmm. Now it's a story to me, and the talent reaches out to me and asks me when it's going to be up. I think everyone's excited about having it out there. But yeah, then I'll move on to the next thing, which will be more projects like we've been doing, like Odessa, like Kill That Man, like Writer's Block, just growing my network, making high quality projects so that when I am ready with my scripts, that even if it's not just me, I say, hey, these are the people that are going to be working on my film when I make it. Mm-hmm. We've put together some really high quality stuff. Visualize what we've done with this script. It can be done and see, are you willing to commit to putting some money to it? Or, at least helping in some way. Because I do want to my goal is not to make small stuff forever. I've never done a feature.
You want to get to that next stepping stone.
Yeah, I want to do a feature, but I don't want to do a cheap feature.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want, my goal is not to make a feature. If I want to make a feature, I could do it right now. Yeah. My goal is to, when I do make features, make them be good features that people want to watch.
Yep.
So that's the one thing about short films. I tell a lot of people I work on movies and do these things, and then they're like, oh, what is it? When can I see it? And it's like, it's this weird, the general population doesn't really understand short film like film people do. Like the film world or creators, like shorts are just very common. Like, oh yeah, I'll watch your short. The average person not in this industry, when you mention a short, it's a very weird concept to them. It's like, oh, it's not a movie. It's like, no, it is. It's just a short one.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, like,
cool.
They want to see like a movie. Yeah. And I want to make sure that when they see it, that it's good.
That's excellent. Well, I feel like that seems to be a good place to leave it. If anybody wanted to further check out your work, where would they go?
Yeah, so you could go to my Instagram, which is Notch11, at Notch11, all spelt out. And I think from there, I've got some links in my bio to go to the Yesterday Is Always Here page, which I haven't posted to because I didn't want to give away anything. So like I haven't posted to there in probably 6 months because I realized anything I post would give away the rest of the story. So I just kind of let that stall out. And then, if you enjoy filmmaking humor, I have a meme page. We haven't covered that.
The meme page is bonkers.
They're original memes that I've created. The clips are not mine. Okay. They're taken from Rocky or Back to the Future or Jumanji or whatever. Actually, there is one from Jumanji on there.
My favorite though, I gotta just plug this. You texted me this a few months ago. You're like, I think you'll appreciate this. It's a clip of Walter and Jesse from Breaking Bad, and they've like just completed a batch and they're like on schedule. And Jesse's like, come on, man, let's do this. And Walter finally agrees. And you said it's like the AD and the script supervisor, and they're
finishing on time.
Finishing on time, man. There's nothing like that feeling.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's taught me a lot about social media. Not to get into it too much, but it is related to film. Is a couple of those memes like blew up. I mean, some of them have
the ones that you created.
Yes, every single one that's on there I've created. Yeah, I didn't take them from anybody. Some of them may be known memes in terms of like the clip that's being used.
Yeah, sure.
But how they're being applied is all unique. I've come up with them. Some of them come 5 minutes into it. Some take 3 hours. I did one that was The Town, which is one of my top 10 favorite movies.
Yeah, Ben Affleck.
Yeah, and it's a 60-second meme. That has like nameplates flying all over. It's hilarious. I mean, I still laugh every time I watch it, which is how I know it's funny. And it got a ton of traction. So some do take longer, but they're all of my own accord. But they do get taken.
And what's the name of that page for anybody that wants to go find that?
Filmmaking, one word, _humor. And it blew up really fast. I mean, I think I only did it for like a month or 60 days. ADHD. I got bored with it. I think I like.
I perfected that thing to my standards. Onto the next
thousands of followers. Some of the memes got, between the channels that shared it, like 6-7 million views.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
that's not fucking around.
Yeah, but it got tiring because then like I discovered a lot about the meme world, which is kind of shady. Which is people, and I find that I even do it too, so I can't get that mad. But like big pages would take my memes, post it as their own, cut off my ending with my logo, and just post it.
Yeah,
with no reference to me.
Yeah.
And I'm watching my meme blow up on another page and get like 6 million views.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I created that, right? And people are like, oh, this is amazing. You got celebrities going on there. Like, I'm not going to name drop them, but like big name celebrities. Like, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
I love this. And I'm like, they don't even know that I made it. And it would kill me inside. And there's nothing you could do it because I found that some of them were like, I'm talking like 30, every major film page that you know of has stolen one of my memes. I guarantee it. I'm not going to name them because I don't have to. Any major film page with like 100,000 plus followers about filmmaking content has used one of my memes that I've created. Some do credit me, some haven't. But I just started to get tired of it, and I was like, and then you're not building any brand recognition. It's like, yeah, eventually I could reach out to people and be like, hey, remember those memes you saw? Like I created those, and like I could start a conversation. Possibly even some celebrities followed me. Once again, I'm not going to name drop, but they're following me. Some of them, were commenting, and it's like, yeah, if I reached out to them and been like, hey, do you want to be in a meme or you want to do this? Like, yeah, maybe they'd favor the idea, where if I didn't have the page, they never would, or I never would have had access to those people.
Yeah, sure.
But it was just like, no one's going to remember this. Like, it's a meme. Like, once you post it, it's out of your mind.
I don't know, man.
Laugh.
Some of those really stick with you, like deep in the unconscious. You ever seen those memes where it's like, Yeah,
I mean, if you hit I did hit one. The one I did with Leonardo DiCaprio, I still see to this day at least once in my feed.
Yeah.
At least once in my feed, every single day.
And what's going on with Leo?
It's an Inception. It's an Inception one.
Oh, is this the one where the director is like, I have this idea for one last shot?
I forget the actor's name who's in
Shogun? No.
No, I think he is. Yeah, but he's in the movie The Creator. He's in The Creator.
Okay, yep.
And he's in the helicopter, and Leonardo DiCaprio is like trying to leave or whatever.
Yep.
And he's like wooing him back in.
Yep.
And then Gordon Levitt's in the background. He's like, no, we need to go. Like, don't even like favor this idea.
First AD, and then Leo's the
so
cinematographer.
First AD's back there, and then it's like, the director's like, do you wanna always live your life wondering what if? And then the AD's like, all right, we'll do it. And he's like, I need a guarantee, Yep. And he's like, I can't guarantee anything.
And that's blown up. I laughed my ass off.
That one once a week in my feed. Sometimes once a day. Like, it just keeps living on. I mean, millions and millions. I'm like, when is this thing gonna die out?
Yeah.
And secretly, like, I love it because I'm just like some guy sitting in my house looking at it, like realizing that almost every single person in the film industry on Instagram, like I'm talking directors of major series and movies, liked, commented, like just big names. And I'm like, wow, it's cool to know that like something I just did from my computer is now like touched all of these people in some way. But like, I can't chase it all down and like get credit for it. It doesn't work like that.
You, sir, are truly, I started this interview by saying you are a madman. And I think that for anybody that's listening to this interview, they're going to see what I see, which is truly a madman. But you also might be a genius.
I hope I'm a genius. It hasn't come to fruition yet.
You are just all over the place with your creative interests, but I love how you stick to them and see them through all the way. So I really wish you the best with this latest project and anything you do in the future, man. And if there's anything that I or we can do to be a part of it or promote it or have you back on the podcast to
definitely
see how everything's, shaken up.
This is a lot of fun because, I don't have a lot of personal friends in the film circle. And, mother, wife, they all support me, right? But like,
do they think you're a madman too?
Yeah, I mean, everyone thinks I'm a madman. I mean, you drive by my house at 2 a.m. and there's a globe in the middle of the woods.
And you're standing over,
and I'm standing in a chest with a knife in my hand and a flashlight. Can I say one more thing about that moment?
Please.
So, I'm trying to film at this lake. That's down the street. I'm trying to put the pieces in place for something I want to make, maybe next year or the year after. And it's run by the Army Corps of Engineer.
Okay.
And there's a whole like, you've done locations. I mean, there's a whole procedure with it. You got to go to their Office of Public Affairs. It's like, it's a big governmental agency. Mm-hmm. And I went in there and, I mentioned that I wanted to do a movie and they're like, oh yeah, sure. Right. And then,
that's nice.
Yeah. Like I was renting an island. They have this island thing you can rent there. And I gave them a check and had my address on it. I didn't think anything of it. Right.
Okay.
And then I'm driving home and I see the person from the office. They live on my street. Oh. And I'm like, this thing, because they looked right at the check, has my address right up top. There's no way if you live on my street that my street wouldn't catch your attention when you're looking at the check. Like you'd be like, oh, this guy lives on my street.
Okay.
Then they were probably immediately like, oh,
I know that guy.
That's why he has the globe out in his front yard 30 feet in the air. He's the movie guy. So I think it helped.
So really none of your neighbors have questioned or said anything up until this point?
No, I mean, when I first started doing the moon thing, my neighbor, like he would come out and he'd like kind of dance around it. And then he'd be like, by the way, like, not that I care, but like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
I'm just filming a movie in my front yard. He's like, he wasn't like upset. He's like, you're doing it like late. I'm like, yeah, well, I have 2 kids. Like, I can't do it till they're asleep, which is why the movie's at night. Just realistically,
it's just practical. You're just working around what you've got,
right? And some cars would go by. I mean, people are probably drunk at 2 a.m, driving down my road, and then they just stop and look at me. And I'm in the middle of a take, but I really live in the woods, like more than Odessa woods, like where
okay, so it's not like you're in like a little suburban neighborhood where like you've got 15 houses.
It's not suburban. It's somewhere between probably Odessa and that. And and sometimes it's scary. Like I'm not like a scaredy cat by any means, but like I'm out in the woods. I have 5 acres in the woods, and like there's like owls that you're just hearing and like crickets and stuff, and you're in the middle of your yard, and sometimes I turn the light off to do something, and like I'm just sitting there in the yard, and I'm just like, is like a coyote or a bear gonna come out of the woods?
Or a skunk.
Yeah, and it's creepy. You start like, the movie's a little ominous and scary too, and you're really in the moment as the actor, so you're living in the moment, and it starts messing with your head, and like you're hearing stuff, and you're like, this is kind of really creepy because there's not a street light. It's just pure darkness when that light's off.
Yeah,
and you're just out there like. It's very weird, and sometimes it was a little creepy, especially when I came down around the house to the garage door, because that's really by the woods, and there is no light there, and it was really creepy at times. Because I do have coyotes and stuff that come out of the woods, but Yeah, I mean, I could just keep talking. It was a lot of fun.
No, I love it, dude. I love it. But yeah, man, I appreciate you being on the podcast, and we'll post your links in the description.
Yeah,
and
any content you need, just let me know.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.